Welcome to Love and Lattes, the podcast designed for women who are ready to stop settling and start living a life full of authentic love, confidence, and real connection. I'm your host, Victoria, the self-love scientist, speaker, and coach, and I'm here to help you reclaim your power, deepen your relationships, and fall unapologetically in love with yourself. So grab your tea, your latte, or your favorite beverage, and let's get started.
What does it really mean to feel secure, seen, and safe in a relationship? Are you done repeating the same relationship patterns but don't know where to start? Relationships, dating, attachment styles. This is a very hot topic in the modern era of 2025. And today's guest, Claire, a relationship coach who helps high-achieving women break free from overthinking and self-doubt, is here to show us the way. Welcome, Claire.
I am so glad to be here. Thanks, Victoria, for having me. I'm really excited. I love talking about this topic literally all day. And yeah, I can't wait to share some good stuff and help your people.
Thank you. So, Claire, why is it that high-achieving women are struggling with self-doubt, and how is that impacting their relationships?
Oh man, this is like, well, like taps the mic. Happy to talk about it. So so high achieving women is definitely like when I look at my audience and especially with my membership and my one-on-one clients, like this is typical. And I remember that you're in DC. Like I've got a good portion of my clients are East Coasters. They live in the city, New York City, the city, DC. They have pretty high level jobs. I'm not talking like, small beans. They're working as lawyers for the government. They're doctors. They own businesses. Like this is the big deal. And what I think is so amazing is that what has worked in a career setting, what's worked in the world, uh, career wise, business wise, it works really well. Those strategies, we'll call them strategies to high achieve. And then we get into a relationship, and what I often find is that I call it slaying in their career, but they are spiraling with overthinking with their relationship. And that can look in different levels. Some people get stuck in patterns where they're attracting not great partners or they're attracting emotionally unavailable people. But my specialty is really helping women who are high achieving that struggle with overthinking, with second guessing, with self sabotage, and they're actually with a good person. Their partner is doing a pretty bang up, decent job. And what that spiral is doing is probably pushing a good person away. So a lot of my clients are mostly in relationship. I do have some that are dating, that are kind of getting over a breakup, navigating a breakup. And what the common theme is that while high achieving really works in life, it is a strategy that doesn't work so well in relationship. So that's like my little piece on the high achieving. And I think you asked, why are those women? Because you would think that type of woman isn't going to be anxious. They show up really confidently. I mean, they're out there writing prescriptions for patients. They're out there litigating. They're out there, doing, and sometimes they're even academics. Like I have a couple people that work in colleges and they have a lot of letters behind their name.
Mhm.
And I really believe it's because they are, again, able to achieve a lot, but the things that make a relationship work are are not, I wouldn't say opposite, but they're just in different areas. It doesn't necessarily translate that well.
And when you mean, what do you mean by that exactly?
Yeah, I think about my client who's a doctor. I just talked to her today, so she's kind of on top of mind. But really intelligent. I mean, obviously, to go to medical school, like that's 8 to 12 years of your life, right? You are doing that for 8 or 12 years. And one thing that I kind of joke with her about, because she's really starting to learn and understand what it's like to be vulnerable, what it's like to be in her feelings and to share her feelings and to be receptive to her partner's feelings. My joke with her is that, like, oh, during your residency, could you just stop and cry? And she's like, no. Oh, in the middle of like assisting in a surgery, can you just like just have a big emotional breakdown? She's like, no. And I have another client who's a lawyer and said same thing. Like, you can't just like break down in the middle of a litigation. Like, you have to perform. You have to show up in a certain way. And so a lot of times, and there's a lot of other things like being a perfectionist, right? So you are cutting somebody open, like you not a lot of margin for error. You have a $15 million lawsuit that's blah, 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 blah. You really don't have a lot of space to be imperfect. And it's actually a bit of relationship kryptonite where vulnerability is about showing up imperfectly. It's about showing the parts of us that are messy, that are, that are messy, imperfect. And what we don't realize is that our imperfection is actually where our power is in a relationship. It's actually the thing that creates more intimacy and more connection.
I agree. I have found that the more safe and secure I find in myself, the I can create the same thing for my partner, and especially in intimacy. You mentioned earlier a really good point that like some women may not be aware that they have something so great and because they're feeling so anxious about everything else. And that's kind of like what I'm like really excited to get into, is like the different attachment styles. Do you feel like there's something like that going on, or is it something else?
Well, so I am a bit of well, if you look at my Instagram or TikTok, you would definitely see that I talk about one specific attachment style, which is anxious attachment. And the irony, though, is that I've built this whole presence around talking about that, but my actual belief around it is that our attachment styles are really the diagnosis covers what's actually going on. And what's actually going on is that it's how we've learned to handle fear. It's
Mm.
how we've learned to behave or act or think and feel when we're scared. So, yeah, I'm happy to talk about attachment styles, but I'm actually more interested in talking about, well, what is happening and what's going on and why are we doing that? And there's reasons with that why that happens, but I really wholeheartedly know that if we want to learn how, okay, it's like great to know that I felt like this, and just like a slight trigger warning, just to be careful with any listeners that might struggle with food or how their bodies look. This is not big, but if you do have a propensity to worry about that or are working through that, then maybe skip forward a minute or two. But when I was diagnosed with an eating disorder when I was 16 years old, I honestly could ran circles around my therapist, and I just knew I could just recite the DSM-4 at the time. It was DSM-5 yet, but I could just I knew all the symptoms, I knew all the diagnosis, and I just felt very flat at a certain point. And what really the trajectory for my healing just accelerated was understanding how do we manage that. And a diagnosis is great. Again, I'm not a therapist or a counselor. Like, if you feel you need that, please go see it. In fact, I recommend that. A lot of my clients, I'd say 95% of my one-on-one clients are currently or have a long history in therapy. But the diagnosis is nice. It can help us get oriented, but it's not necessarily the tool to knowing a diagnosis is different than understanding how to navigate through it.
Mm, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So how do we are we thinking about like diagnosing attachment styles, or is it do you apply that with like learning what your attachment style is?
Well, I think well, let's go back to your original question, which I'm realizing I didn't even answer, which is like, let's talk about attachment styles. So, attachment styles, the way that I see it, is really how we've learned to attach or to connect with our partners. And we've learned that through how we've attached to our caregivers, right? So we learn behavior. There's associated learning. We watch and we observe on a conscious level, and more importantly, on a subconscious level, what it means to be in relationship. So as we develop, I call it growing up in a condition, right? So cacti and ferns or moss, very different conditions, right? They are products of the condition. Like if moss tries to go grow in Arizona, it's not going to work well because the condition isn't right for it. But we all experience certain conditions. So cactus thrive in dry and sunny, hot, right? So your condition in your early development might be different than mine, right? So yes, maybe we had parents. Some people don't have both parents. Some people have one parent or uh, in any case or way. But based on the condition, can create certain ways of being, thinking, feeling. So the one that I mostly talk about and I support are women that are anxiously attached. They're high achieving, anxiously attached, and that tends to happen because their adult relationship, there was typically some kind of uncertainty, some kind of maybe even volatility. Uncertainty is a really kind of good blanket term. Maybe dad was out of town a lot. That can create uncertainty. Or maybe mom had big emotional releases, or maybe you moved a lot. Maybe, so whatever kind of condition can create uncertainty can definitely impact anxiety, can make us feel anxious that our caregiver is going to be gone, or that I can't trust that this person's going to be there or behave a certain way, or my need is not going to get met. And actually, I would just even say that any attachment style, how their needs got met or not, is actually indicative of that. So that's the one I primarily talk about. I do occasionally talk about avoidant because, lucky for me, I was anxiously attached, dated, married, and avoidant, and now we have what we call an earned secure relationship. So, unfortunately, for people who maybe are familiar with attachment styles, but it's they're on two sides of a coin. So these two, and I'm going to just refer to the main ones. There's all these kind of fun flavors and mix-ins that we can get now. I think there's fearful avoidant, which is disorganized, which is kind of a mishmash of things. But avoidant is another kind of attachment style where their condition, what they kind of grew up with, was that their caregivers were maybe rejecting them, unresponsive, or they kind of shut down or shut off expression. So they learned to withdraw. They learned to shut down. They learned to want to move away from charged situations. And that's very different for an anxious. An anxious tends to wants lots of closeness. They feel very fearful of abandonment. They want reassurance. They tend to be quote unquote clingy. So you can see, and because they're on two different spectrums, the natural thing is that they're attracted to each other. We attract each other. So, what I think is really unique about how I coach and how I teach is that a lot of times we think that, oh, I wish I could have been born secure, or this other person could have been born secure, and then my life would have been easier. And uh, that's just not, I don't really subscribe to that because we get dealt the cards that we're dealt. And try as we might want to try it. And I did this. I did this for years. I'm like, oh, well, I got to find somebody that's secure. That's my goal. If I can find somebody secure and lock it down, then I'll be safe. Well, guess what? I had met many wonderful, secure people, and I had found a way to blow it up. I self-sabotaged my way right out of that relationship. So I'm a big proponent of taking charge of your trajectory, of being empowered, of taking full responsibility and moving in the direction of healing. So that's kind of like the little, and then the secure attachment meant that you just had a lovely childhood. You had healthy, trusting relationships. Good for you. I'm just kidding. Um,
I could hear it. I was like, oh
good for you, you biatch. Sorry. But yeah, they were in conditions where they could talk about their feelings and their needs, and they had parents that could help regulate their emotions, and that's just lovely. I'm kidding. But I say that because yes, those people were dealt great cards, and also we can move in the direction. That's why I call it earned secure. You can earn being in a secure attachment. Like that is totally possible. That's what I teach. So it's absolutely possible. And I'm not saying it's simple, but not always easy. Two different things. It can be simple and not always easy. And so it's a matter of, are we willing to put in the work and the time and the effort? And I believe me, I have tried all kinds of ways to like work around doing the work, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So that's my stance for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like that vulnerability piece definitely comes into play when it comes to the work because there's that saying where you can't go around it, you got to go through it.
Aha, yes, absolutely. The only way over is through.
Yeah.
You got to
So
go through it.
I was thinking about what you said earlier though about the different styles and like let's talk about the anxious one primarily because it's like I can see how excited you get and I love that. So what about is it possible for people to move or graduate from these styles? Even like let's
Yeah.
say if you were like in your upbringing you were dealt with this anxious attachment style. And does that mean like doing the work can help you integrate or develop more of a secure attachment?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I just also noticed you reflected something back to me that I want to just maybe make a quick edit here around dealt. And what I think that kind of does is that kind of villainizes our parents, and whether your parent was actually a villain or they were a saint doesn't really matter. But I think the piece that I want to rectify is that we create we create these attachment styles, and yes, we can be in a condition, and ultimately though we create our reality. So whether and here's an example. So I have a whole range of clients, and their experiences with creating this attachment can be very different. So if they have a wound, an abandonment wound, for example, abandonment wound. Wow. It is. I did not have coffee today, so we're riding on matcha fumes. So one of the things that I can say, I'm just thinking about one person where they had a very, like, I would even say benign, like their experience is that, oh, my parents were great. And what was even interesting is that maybe their parent didn't pick her up from ballet one time or something like that. And it created this whole, and I think everybody can kind of relate to that, at least I can, of I've been forgotten. Maybe mom or dad hit traffic, they show up to the soccer field, the football field, or the softball field late, and it is just an absolute meltdown. They're only 10 or 15 minutes late, and we felt forgotten. So it can even be as benign as that, which you wouldn't think has an impact on a child. But imagine being a little kid and just feeling like you've been forgotten. And one of my favorite sayings is that we can drown in 4 feet of water or 4 inches of water. It doesn't really matter. Trauma is trauma.
Mhm.
That's it. Uh, so I would definitely say that this propensity to create, we are the creators. Whether we were forgotten at ballet and we create a wound, we got hurt. Now and I also just want to be clear that this is not to minimize anybody's experience or to diminish anybody because that's painful. I mean, I'm just thinking about a time I got forgotten to get picked up, and that's one of the very shallow, not shallow, minor abandonment wounds that I have. So I just have a lot of compassion. And again, we can drown in 4 feet of water or 4 inches of water. And so we can, what you also asked was, can we move to secure 100%? Because what was created, if we created a story that I got forgotten at ballet for 15 minutes, and if you're a little kid, that is really painful. We create a narrative, we create a story that we feed, that we focus on, that creates a wound. And while we can create our attachment styles, I really am just a big believer that we're creating all the time. We're creating new cells all the time. Like I just what I swift my floors today. I'm like, how do we have this much dander? Like what? Ew. This is just constantly like this dust. Yuck. But we are constantly doing that. We're constantly shedding and we're constantly evolving. And so, in that same concept, on a cellular level, we are shedding all the time. What was created can be recreated,
Mm,
wired can be rewired.
yeah.
What was given can be reshaped.
That's interesting. I have to say I agree though, because I feel that, in some instances, I'd like to think I myself am like very secure and like happy in a wonderful relationship, but then something will trigger or like something will just turn back on and I'm like, why am I acting this way?
Yeah.
Or we'll have a conversation and I'm like, we'll talk it out and then I'll realize like, wow, I actually haven't processed this or this is foreign territory, therefore I had no other way except to resort back to the only thing I knew how to do. So I think that's a very interesting concept that you can still kind of graduate and build and develop, but then still have these little like almost like loose ends. But
Yep.
to me, I think when you're in that safe relationship, you're like, oh, I still, I haven't really actually fully looked at this because
Yeah.
it requires me to be vulnerable.
Yeah. And I mean, that's like a congratulations, I feel, is like in order when I really do believe that the nature of relationship is to trigger the shit out of us. Like that's kind of that seems like very bizarre to say. I'm not saying this is, let me just be really clear. I'm not saying you seek triggers. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying date a toxic person and then figure your shit out. That's definitely not what I'm saying. I do believe though that even the healthiest relationships, you're going to experience conflict. I really just want to demystify this whole thing of like it should be so easy and like like let's hold hands into the sunset on Instagram. Like shut up. That is not real. Ask any married person to even great people. There are like you're gonna have conflict.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying, and of course, there are people that really just do legit have great relationships, but that's the exception. That's not the norm. We
Yeah.
really need to normalize how we manage conflict and how we repair with partners. And so, again, I'm not saying that you should seek out a toxic person or tolerate toxicity, or I even don't like saying that word toxic. Bleh. I mean, I want to like scrape my tongue, but I'm not saying that we go seek those things out or that we need to experience pain to transcend. I don't believe in that. But I do think it's really, I want to normalize conflict is necessary and healthy. It's necessary and healthy.
Yeah.
And when we can embrace that conflict, even with like people that you like, haven't you had conflicts? Like, and if you haven't, then I really want you to look at your people pleasing. I really want you to examine, like, are you actually happy? Are you burnt out? Are you exhausted? Because talk to a people pleaser who's in denial of, oh no, I don't have conflict. I'm like, okay, how happy are you?
How's that
Not very.
going?
How's that going? Yeah, I'm sure you're real happy crying into your pillow at night. Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. What would you say for listeners who, especially for women, if they are in like that, especially like as in like DC, we're high powered, always working, and at the end of the day, they're like, man, like my relationship isn't working. Like my partner is driving me nuts. What would you say are some great ways for them to start like a reflection or even to notice and to start making the change? or I don't want to say like make the change, like you have to do it, but it is, when people start complaining and you hear the same thing over and over, you're like,
Mhm.
one of my friends told me a long time ago, because I would tell them what was happening in my life, and they were like, what's the common denominator?
Mhm.
And it was me.
Hi, I'm the drama. It's
It's
me. Yeah,
me.
it's me. Well, I think what you're asking is, well, I just want to say this. A lot of times when we're feeling a trigger, when we're feeling, and I'll just say blame. Now, I will say that, and if you could go on my comments on my TikTok or on my Instagram, actually, no, I take it back. I'd say like a year ago, maybe like even 6 months ago, there would be a lot of people that would want to blame their partners. And so I would just say that you're probably very early in your healing journey. So blame is I'll just be straight up around it. If we're blaming, you're not really putting the reps into your healing journey. Blame and healing are on opposites ends of the spectrum. So when I look at when we are early in our healing journey, we tend to shame, blame, criticize, and judge. And when we are on a path to healing, we accept, we open, we allow, we are curious. And a lot of times you can tell where somebody is on their journey if they have the propensity to blame or to criticize or to judge or to shame somebody versus looking at situations with love, with curiosity, with openness, with acceptance. Now, that doesn't mean that we, again, tolerate bad behavior because the most loving thing is to remove yourself from that situation. That's a radical act of self-love and acceptance that actually I get to say no because that's not loving to myself, right? So I just want to be clear because I guarantee I know that there's people out there that are like, well, as she said to just accept bad behavior. That's not what I'm saying. But I would say in that journey, it is self-reflection of what part am I playing here? And I would call that responsibility, which is very different than blame. Blame says you spilled the milk, you effed up. You are an F up, right? I don't know if you curse on here, but that's what blame says. Love says, "Oh, the milk spilled. Oh, let's clean it up." So when we look at people that want to blame or they want to change, that would be kind of if I'm not sure where your listeners are at, but we want to really examine, are we ready for healing? Because shame, blame, criticism, and judgment, nobody wants to be around that. And we may think that we're not doing that in our relationships, but take a good look at them. And I will call myself out in the past 100%. I was blaming and
I
and
was
and it's
same love. I was, oh,
yeah.
no, like I'm perfect. No, I am not.
Yeah, right. You know what was really validating for me in like the most horrible but best way possible was I would monkey bar my way through relationships in my 20s. Like I literally the bed was warm and I'd be like moving into another bed, you know? I would just that's how I rolled because I was too insecure to actually be single. I had placed a lot of social capital in being in a relationship. I had placed a lot of my value in that. I loved being a girlfriend. I loved acting like a girlfriend. I loved being claimed like a girlfriend. I loved it. And it was not healthy, I'll tell you that much. But I'd say by the third breakup, and I had dated guys, they were great guys. And by the third breakup, I was seriously so freaked out because each breakup, the one, two, three at that point, they had said almost the same thing to me, and I was tripping
Mm,
because they basically said something to the effect of, I just feel like I'm not good enough for you. I'm not doing enough for you. And by the first one, I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're not doing it. And I just felt so like validated. And by the second one, I was like, this is weird. Like they don't even know each other. Like, did they talk? Like the conversation was sounding like the breakup conversation was pretty much the same. And
mm,
by the third one, it was so clear that I was the common denominator, that there was something was that was happening in the relationship where well, here's what was happening. I was projecting my not enoughness onto them. So they actually internalized. They really did feel and believe that they weren't good enough. And looking back, God, shame on me. Man, I did not handle those well. And I was just projectile vomiting my insecurities onto them. Yeah. So, blame is, I would say, feels good in the moment, but man, it has a long-term cost, long-term impact. So, I mean, it feels good in the moment. You can blame people, and that has a great payoff. It's very fleeting. And eventually, over time, if we don't take responsibility of how we show up, then we're gonna bump up into some stuff.
No, that was amazing. And I really appreciate you being so transparent and honest. And also, I think you made a really great point, though, about how the direction to heal is one way and the other is in the opposite direction. And I can, again, also personally tap in and be like, yep, I was there and I was thinking that would solve my problem and it would only get better. And it only dug me a deeper hole.
Yeah,
Whereas you experience the same discussion and breakups, I experienced the same thing like in my own like personal space. I was like, why am I like this? Or like, why is this happening to me? And
totally.
the moment you finally recognize, you're like, what do I need to do? Like you said, that the acceptance part is just that's a very bold and powerful moment. Yeah, in my opinion.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I also just, gosh, I think the other piece of that is takes a lot of maturity. It takes a lot of maturity to take responsibility. I would say it's immature to blame. And one of the first places we'll blame is ourselves. That's also something important to look at. That blame doesn't even have to be an external thing. It can be a deeply internal thing. And in fact, I would just say that that's kind of typical for a high achiever, that because we have built, I would say, personality, built an infrastructure internally, a framework that our lovability, our worth is based on what we can do and what we can achieve. And the dismantling of that and true connection and relationship where we feel loved and seen for just exactly who we are, the when we dismantle those thoughts and the framework that I have to do or achieve to get love, that's actually where we it's like the inside of a truffle. We can melt into receiving.
Mhm.
And I know there's a lot of talk out there, and at one point I definitely would have subscribed to the masculine feminine, and I think it's really bastardized these days, where we confuse them with gender roles. And when we have the quality of deep feeling, of openness, of access, of expansiveness, like the ocean or water, combined with structure and form and inspiration and motivation, which would be considered like the masculine, we need both to make worlds. So a lot of times we confuse this, I need to be in my feminine. You're just talking, well, actually you're talking a gender role that's man-made by capitalism and misogyny and white supremacy, versus when you actually look on the deepest level of what those mean, we need both. And I just say that too because I have a lot of masculine qualities. My husband has a lot of feminine qualities. I'm a fire sign, he's a earth sign. And what I could definitely say is that when we fully understand how to soften, to be vulnerable, to be ourselves, to fully dismantle our defense systems, which is actually what causes the conflict, our how we defend and how we protect ourselves. So I'll just go back to anxious and avoidant styles. Uh, an anxious person will want to cling, they'll want to grasp, they'll want to attach, and not in a healthy way. Avoidance want to they move away. They tend to shut down. They need space. When we actually learn that there's each system is both insecure. In fact, when you look at how these diagnoses are created, like both anxious and avoidant are insecure attachments versus secure attachments. So
Mm.
when you actually understand that those both come from insecurity, and again, this goes back full circle to what this is all about. How do you deal with fear and how do you understand somebody else's fear? How do you understand your fear? How do you hold yourself in your fear? How do you soothe yourself in your fear? That's really kind of important. Not kind of, that is important if you want to have a long lasting relationship.
Yeah. This has been so amazing, Claire. Like I'm like eating up like everything you're saying, and there's been so many gold nuggets that you're sharing, and I'm so grateful for you to be on the podcast. And I know we're a little bit ahead on our time, but I would love, is there anything you'd love to share with our listeners as we close out our conversation?
Yeah, I think the last little piece here that I'd like them to hear and to feel is that you're not alone. A lot of times this can be a big badge of shame. We feel like we're alone, that everything's working except for this one area. That you're not alone, and that your partner, especially if they're a good person, they're on your team. They're not doing this to you or against you. They're actually on your team, and that healing is really possible if you have a path and you have support and you have a how.
Mm. Thank you so
Mm.
much, Claire. Thank you for being on Love and Lattes.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.